All right, everybody, we've got another very special guest for you all. Everybody, please welcome to the show, Matthew Schofield. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Hi, happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited for you to be here today because I didn't read any of the Steamroller Man stuff until this morning, and I was pleasantly surprised
Oh, good.
to
Great.
For all the campiness. And
Yes.
I mean, if you can't tell, I left my background on today with the '60s Batman because
Nice. Well,
oh, here we go. Nice.
There we go.
I love it. That is amazing. It is my favorite cowl because of the eyebrows.
yeah, I have I mean, as you can probably tell if you read Steamroller Man, I've definitely got a soft spot in my heart for Adam West's Batman, and that show was, I just love that show just because I think it's one of the actually most comic accurate for its time.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most comic accurate like film or TV adaptations.
Yep. I agree.
Because they really did like capture the spirit of those late 50s, early 60s Batman comics and the campiness that was already in the comics at that point. So yeah, I love it.
No, I completely agree. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good place to start for us because it is your first time in the show and we want to get into your origin story. So
sure.
Where did that all start for you with, writing the comics and then having this idea for Steamroller Man?
Oh, well, how far back do you want me to go?
As far as you want. I mean, you can, the dawn of time. I don't know.
Yeah, when two people fell in love. Let's start there.
There you go.
Well, let's not quite go far far back. But yeah, I mean, I was, I think I encountered the Batman 66 TV show before I really even knew what comics were. It was on in reruns when I was a kid every afternoon. So when I would get home from school, and this was when I was like in preschool, first grade kind of thing, I watched that every day and I loved it. Didn't pick up on the comedic kind of aspect of it at that age. Of course, I just took it in purely as a superhero show.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, the Super Friends cartoon was on Saturday mornings. And so those two shows were sort of really formative influences just in my love of superheroes in general. And then I got my first comic bought for me. I remember that I was able to read it myself. So I must have been first or second grade.
Okay.
And then, I've just loved comics ever since. I started like seriously collecting comics around age 13 and haven't stopped since. And around that time when I was first starting to collect comics, that was when the Giffen, DeMatteis and Kevin Maguire's version of the Justice League was coming out.
Yep.
And that was a, comedic superhero kind of treatment of those characters as well, which I loved that. And then a few years later, The Tick came out. The Tick's another huge influence on Steamroller Man.
Oh, I could see
and
that.
The Tick kind of blew my mind because that was so funny. And so yeah, from that point on, I just have always loved superheroes with a bit of silliness in them. And so I as a teenager, I wanted to, grow up to draw comics for Marvel or DC. Like that was my dream. And that sort of led me on the path to an animation career. And so I ended up working in animation, which I still do. And but I always wanted to draw comics. Like had a dream to always make my own comic one day. And so about 6 or 7 years ago, I just got to the point where I was like, well, I'm not getting any younger. If I'm going to if I want to draw a comic and I want to make my own comic, I got to stop just saying like, yeah, one day, and just dive in and start doing it. And so that's what I did with Steamroller Man. And the idea for Steamroller Man came from a conversation with my kids who were little at the time, we're a geeky family. My wife's into sci-fi and comics, and so we brought the kids up kind of. I used to read Jack Kirby comics to them as bedtime stories and stuff like that. Yeah,
you're going to learn about New Genesis tonight.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I read Commandy and OMAC and like those Jack Kirby 70s DC comics.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So, we were having a conversation around the dinner table about cool superhero names. And so, we were just going around trying to, just coming up with names. And my youngest son said Steamroller Man. And I immediately got a picture in my mind of what the character looks like, a superhero, typical superhero body with but a giant steel roller as a head. And so then when I kind of thought like I'm gonna make my own comic, I had all these ideas for like these grand epic stories that I wanted to do, but I didn't want to start with those because I'd never done a comic before. So I thought, well, I'll just do something that's just going to be for fun and, a gag basically. And so I thought, what I could do a little gag comic about that Steamroller Man character. That'd be fun. And so I started doing that. And then it just kind of, the ideas snowballed as I was drawing the first couple of pages. I just sort of came up with more and more kind of jokes and ideas that I could do with that character. And it was just so much fun that I just kept doing it. And so now I've been, I started publishing the comic online about a year after I'd started drawing on and off. And I've been doing that, publishing it online since 2018. And so now, the intention was always to print it. So I do each sort of, chapter of the comic I do as though it's an issue of a printed comic, and I plan out the pages with page turns and double page spreads and stuff in mind. So now I'm doing a Kickstarter to print the first issue, but I'm halfway through. I've done the second issue already, and I'm halfway through the third issue. So the intention is that it'll be an ongoing series. And I think the first Kickstarter was sort of a trial balloon to see, can I do a Kickstarter and how does that all work? And it's going really well. The campaign's been going great. And so I definitely think I'll be doing this to publish each issue, is to just keep rolling with Kickstarter, pardon the pun.
Yeah.
So,
no,
never pardon puns.
I love puns.
Puns are welcome. Yeah.
Puns are my lifeblood since I've been doing Steamroller, man. I think in puns. Yeah.
And alliterations, right?
Yeah. I love all that. Like, I love wordplay.
Yeah.
I always have. And it's just sort of the way my brain kind of works is like switching letters and figuring out like, clever ways to, come up with wordplay puns and stuff.
It's not easy to do that though either. It's like it seems
it's
like
a challenge.
Reading that stuff, it seems so simple and you're like, wow, that makes so much sense. But like to come up with it off the top of your head is not easy.
Yeah, it's definitely been a challenge, but it's fun. So,
yeah. Oh yeah.
I enjoy it.
So you mentioned you were releasing the book digitally at first. Were you releasing on like Webtoons or something like that, or just on your own like website?
Well, I actually started with just a Facebook page because I didn't know really, like I'm not really a webcomics reader, even though, the ironic thing is I published it and I still am publishing it for so long purely as a webcomic. But I was never into like reading comics online that much. Like I just don't have the patience for clicking to a new page. Like I can last about 10 or 20 pages and then I'm like, I gotta go do something else. But I think that's just because I'm used to print comics. I grew up with them, so I much prefer reading a comic in print. But I started with just a Facebook page because I wasn't aware of webcomic communities or anything online, and I didn't really know how to go about it. So I just started a Steamroller Man Facebook page, and I started just putting my pages up on the Facebook page every time I got one done. And then I, dug in and worked out how to put together a WordPress website. So that's when I set up steamrollerman.com, which is my website, still active. And but I also post it to Tapas and Global Comics, and there's another webcomic hosting site called Comic Fury. So my sort of strategy was like, I just want to put it up on as many places as I can to just get the widest possible bandwidth and get people to see it, get it in front of as many people as possible. I specifically didn't do Webtoons because Webtoons has the vertical scroll format, and I was really much more about the comic page as a storytelling device. And, it just, like, the way that I set up my pages, I really want them to flow in that Z kind of reading order kind of formation, not just straight down the page. And so it's difficult. It would be a real challenge to go back and cut up the pages and reformat them into the Webtoons format. It's also a little bit problematic because Steamroller Man has such a wide head that visually I have to compose my panels almost always. I do like the entire width of the comic page, which is a widescreen kind of aspect ratio, whereas Webtoon is the portrait style phone aspect ratio, and he just wouldn't fit on
it's just too wide
page very well. I'd have to do so much like resizing and recomposing of panels that I just was like, I'm not even going to bother with.
So it's like you almost like draw the head and then build everything around.
Kind of have to, yeah. I kind of have to, when I'm roughing out the page layout, I have to sort of draw Steamroller Man and then I draw a panel around it to work out, okay, so what size is this panel going to be? I need to show his head because he's talking most of the time, so it's all just dependent on what the story point is that I'm trying to convey. But yeah, a lot of the time it's hard to get him in a vertical panel. It's easier to get him in a more horizontally arranged panel. So
I read issue 0, like you talked about, it's on your website.
Cool.
A lot of the stories, and
the cat in the tree one.
The cat in the tree one was awesome. That's a great story, and I highly recommend anybody to go check it out on the website. I thought it was a lot of fun. It had the spirit of the Tick for sure, and like 60s Batman. I love all that stuff.
Great.
And I just I think the best part is, and Chris is scrolling through some of these pages where we're seeing it now, the alter ego Steamroller Man with the giant glasses on is like, of course nobody knows it's him, right? Like, that's the ridiculous part.
That was the first gag that I came up with, was, because when I was thinking like, okay, well, what would be funny situations that a superhero with a huge steel roller as a head, of course he couldn't really have a secret identity.
Right.
And then I thought, well, it would be funny if like Clark Kent, because that's also one of the campy aspects of superhero comics that I love, is that no one recognizes Clark Kent with just, he puts on a pair of glasses.
Yeah.
And, trying to get too dug into like the realism or the believability of superhero comics, I think sort of breaks the whole equation. And so I wanted to, with Steamroller Man, like it's almost deliberately, daring people to like, you can't question the reality of this because there is no reality. It's a guy with a giant steel roller as a head. So if you're looking at that and thinking, but that's not realistic, then you're kind of missing the point completely.
Right.
So yeah, I'm really diving into the more absurd aspects of superhero comics with mine. So, but in a loving way, like I love that about superhero comics.
It feels like a love letter for sure. It doesn't feel like you're, poking fun at the genre.
It's definitely supposed to be.
And I'll say too that Chris and I, this comes up almost every other interview, but a lot of these Kickstarter books are just independent books that we see fund very quickly, like yours did in less than an hour.
Yeah.
You've hit a lot of stretch goals, which we'll talk about in a second here. Mm-hmm. But it almost always comes down to it's a book that's fun to read. Like I feel like in mainstream comics today, I mean, we're seeing a little more in the indie publishers and things, but there's just not enough fun. You know, everything's so serious and like beating you down. It's like, I don't want to read that with every issue of a comic sometimes. And, you know, there's stuff out there that's for everybody, but like sometimes you just want to like check out and have a fun book that has wordplay and, you know, it's like something that you've seen in the past, like with 60s Batman, where it's like, okay, this is something that I've enjoyed and it works well on the page. So
yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. That was definitely my intention. And particularly because, you know, my kids were young. They were both, you know, under 13 when I first created Steamroller Man. So I was definitely making I was making a comic that they could read and enjoy, but I could also get some fun out of it as well. And so it's really is aimed at like a general audience. I think definitely comic fans will really enjoy it because I put so many like references and in jokes that specifically reference like famous stuff that you would definitely know if you have been reading comics for any length of time. But you can also hand it to your 10-year-old kid and they can have a fun time reading it as well, because there's no swearing and there's no blood. It's just any violence is the comic type, you know, biff bam pow type violence.
and then if you're like Chris and I and you love Batman the animated series, you have that amazing variant cover.
Oh yeah. I'm glad that that landed with you guys, because I love that too. Ruben Perez, the guy who did that cover, he's a big, you know, fan of animated superhero cartoons. He's on social media, on Instagram and TikTok. He's got a big following, and he does a lot of fan art, and he sort of does character redesigns, and I love his style. It's like, I sort of think of it as like it's all your favorite kind of modern superhero cartoon styles all mashed into one. And so I reached out to him and asked, you know, here's my comic. Would you be interested in doing a variant cover? And he sort of, you know, came up with that Batman the animated series style design himself, and I was like, oh man, that looks awesome. I wouldn't have thought of the red skies and all that, the lightning bolt, but it kind of works. And so when I got the image, I put the type, I changed the type so that it was sort of reminiscent of the Batman animated series fonts, and it works really well. So I'm glad you guys like it.
Well, you can tell Mike and I have been doing this too long, because my next comment, I guess, it was going to be about the covers here and how they are kind of a celebration of comics throughout the years. Like the cover that you did is really like a 60s, 70s superhero, specifically Batman cover that you would see. My favorite, probably this one being like, this feels like a modern cover, like something that I would see at Marvel on the shelves today. And
the John Boy Myers one,
this one I love too, because this gives me like the 80s, 90s zine comics feel. I don't know if that's what you're going for, but that's how I feel about
especially the color palette too, with the purple and the light blue.
And then of course the homage to the greatest animated superhero cartoon of all time, Batman the Animated Series.
I mean, you totally got the references. So John Boy Myers is a friend of mine, and he offered to do a cover for this, and you know, he's one of the top cover artists in the industry right now, doing stuff for Image and Marvel and DC and I think Boom and IDW, and so I didn't really give any of the artists like any brief. I just said like
Steamroller,
except for Sam Grinberg is the artist who did the more indie style one. And I asked him was like, could you do one of Steve Rollerman with the big glasses? Because I thought that'll really work well with his style. with Sam's style. Yeah.
Chris and I are cracking up because I didn't realize his name was Steve Rollerman. I just didn't pick that up.
Yeah,
it's amazing. I love it.
But yeah, Sam is an indie cartoonist. I happen to work. He works with me on The Simpsons, and he's one of the character designers. So I knew he was into comics, and he makes his own comics. He's been an indie cartoonist doing his own comics since I've known him, and I love his comics, and I love his art style, and so I just asked him, like, would you want to do a cover for Steamroller? I know it's like not usually your thing, superheroes, but and he was like, oh, I'd love to. Yeah, that'd be awesome. So yeah, and what he produced was fantastic. So yeah, I specifically did want in response to what you were saying, Chris, was I specifically did want like different looks to each cover and different styles. Just because I think it's more interesting that way. If you're going to do variant covers, then let's really have them like vary from each other. And they all turned out great. Couldn't be happier with how they all look. So yeah, it's awesome.
And I just gotta say real quick, because I looked up Sam and his work, and of course he's got a section for comics and zines.
Yes,
but I knew right away from this man's art that he was a punk rocker, because you go on his site and like one of the first things you see is a Less Than Jake image and some Against Me images and Bad Religion, and
he does a lot of band posters, and you know, he's definitely got that punk style, that indie style. So yeah, he's all into that whole side of the comic scene. So yeah.
No, it's really cool. I think it's an awesome idea, like you said, to have diversity with the, because like a lot of with the variant covers, a lot of times you see the variants and you're like, oh, okay, this is just, it's like 4 or 5 headshots of the character or something like that. And it's all the same vein. They're all really, all really muscular drawings of the character, like 90s muscles on the characters. And no, I think what you did is a really cool approach. And I guess, I mean, that's probably a good spot to talk about the Kickstarter in general and how and what you're offering. I mean, we talked about the variant covers. You have a bunch of stretch goals you're looking to achieve, but you also have the blank sketch covers, and you have a color me cover, which I think is a really cool idea, right?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a cool idea too. It's not getting a lot of traction in terms of people picking up that reward yet. But I thought that was a fun idea, is like that's going to be printed on like a sketch cover type, you know, cardstock cover, but it's just going to have the inks. So if you want to color it in, or you want to give it to your favorite comic book colorist at a convention and commission them to color it, because I know that like Adam Hughes's wife, who is she's an artist in her own right, she will often, you know, you can get her to color one of Adam Hughes's sketches. If you commission him to do a sketch at a convention, you can pay a little extra and she'll color it for you. So I know there are colorists at conventions who will do commissions on the spot. So I just thought that would be a kind of fun idea. And I'm offering like a limited number of like sketch cover commissions. I think there's only one left of those, which is just front cover. Like both of the front and back cover commissions have already been taken. And yes, a bunch of stretch goals, which we've already unlocked. The campaign's been growing really well. So I think at the moment, all backers are going to get a digital MP3 file of the Steamroller Man theme, which is in the Kickstarter video, which is a very catchy tune.
Yeah, it's a very familiar tune. I was going to ask you about that too. So how, with the words and stuff, did you just put all that together yourself?
I did not. So when I first had the Kickstarter not Kickstarter, sorry. Got Kickstarter on the brain.
Yeah.
When I first had the Steamroller Man Facebook page, one of the people who was following the page contacted me and said, "Hey, I'm a big fan of Steamroller Man. I'm also a musician and I do musical fan art of," because he was like, "I can't draw, but the way I do fan art is I create like compositions about comics and stuff that I love, and I love Steamroller Man."
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too. I'd never heard of such a thing.
Wow.
And so he asked me, like, would you mind if I did like a musical piece based on Steamroller Man? And I was like, I would love that. That would be awesome. So he said, like, okay, well, just let me know, like, what if he asked, like, if Steamroller Man was like a TV show and this piece of music was the theme to the show, what style of music would it be? And I told him, well, it's very influenced by Batman 66. So, I love those cartoon theme songs that were mostly composed for Hanna-Barbera cartoons by a guy called Hoyt Curtin in the 60s. He did the Johnny Quest theme and the Space Ghost theme, and so it's that sort of jet set age kind of style of music. But I also said my art style is also really influenced by 1970s Marvel comics, and so maybe if you put in some kind of 70s funk element to it, but it should definitely sound like a TV theme from those eras. And he was like, "Don't say anymore. I got it. I know exactly what I'm going to do." And so then he came back, messaged me 2 weeks later, and he sent me this tune with vocals and like he wrote the lyrics, he wrote the music, he sang the song, and got his brother and a friend of theirs to do backing vocals. And it was amazing. And so, I shared it on the Facebook page and said, this really talented guy just did this. And then when it came time to do the Kickstarter, I wanted to use that music in my video. And so I contacted, his name's David Geringer, I should say. I haven't mentioned his name. His name's David Geringer, and he's super talented. He has a company called Next Arc Studios, which I think you can find. I think there's a Facebook page. And it's definitely online. But I contacted him before I was going to launch the Kickstarter and said, "Hey, I know you just did this for fun, but if I paid you as though it was a musical commission, could I use the music in the Kickstarter video?" Mm-hmm. And he was like, "Yeah, that works for me." So we worked that out. And so that's why, I'm using it as sort of the theme song in the video for the Kickstarter. And I thought it would be a cool thing to offer that as a stretch goal. And then depending on the number of like I'm going to pay him a little bit extra on the back end per number of backers that back the campaign. So
that's very cool. That's a great idea.
So you get that. And then there's going to be 4 bonus digital comics from other indie creators on Kickstarter. So that's sort of a way for me to sort of spread the word about other people's comics. And then I think everybody who backed at the physical level is getting a trading card, a mini comic, which is going to be the story with the cat in the tree, because that's really the first Steamroller Man story. Mm-hmm. So I'll be printing that for the first time as a little mini comic. And then there's a sticker, and I can't remember what else. Oh yeah,
the cover and paper stock.
Upgraded paper stock for the cover and the interiors.
Yep.
So the covers are going to be printed on like glossy cardstock, and then the interiors will be gloss text paper rather than just the uncoated text paper. So it'll just make for a nicer product all around. And then the next stretch goal is at 7,000, and that unlocks a Virgin variant of the cool. John Boy Myers cover, where there's no logo. It's just the artwork. Cool. So that'll just unlock that to be added as an add-on and unlock the reward tier. So,
and you're almost at 7,000.
I kind of ran out of ideas for the stretch goals because
it kept going up.
Yeah, the campaign kept going up, and I was like, I didn't expect it to do this well. Like, so.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, and for it says 3 days right now as we're recording. It's gonna say it'll be the last day when the show drops. It'll be on Wednesday. But
yeah, so the official.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Just talk about that a little bit for our listeners and how they can.
Yeah. So the campaign ends officially on Thursday morning at 8:55 a.m. On June 6th. So technically, Wednesday's the last full day of the campaign. June 5th is the last day of the last full day of the campaign. But Kickstarter just introduced this new feature called late pledges. They actually dropped that when I was already in the middle of my campaign. So what that enables me to do is certain reward tiers are still going to be available to order after the official end of the campaign. So I'm going to kind of keep those up for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Basically, I'll keep them up until the funds come through from Kickstarter. Because then at that point I got to send surveys out and send orders to printers and stuff. Because the book's all done. I should mention that the book's completely done. It's ready to go to the printer. All the artwork for everything is done. So it should be a simple matter of just sending the order and then, getting the ETA of when everything's going to come back. And I can hopefully fulfill it as quickly as possible for people. So
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So you can still play the upside is, even if you're listening to this after or watching this after June 5th or June 6th, you can still pledge to the campaign for a couple of weeks. So
great.
And please do.
And this is something I was really happy when they sent an email announcing it, because I'm not the biggest fan of Indiegogo because of their platform, how it runs. But the one thing and this is why I love competition between the different platforms, but the one thing they did that no one else was doing that I thought was great was the in-demand.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what this is. It's an in-demand to keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely something I was weighing up, because I think that's a great feature of Indiegogo as well. So when I was first, planning to do a crowdfunding campaign and just checking out like all the different platforms, that was definitely an attractive feature of Indiegogo. But I ultimately went with Kickstarter just because they've got the biggest footprint online. Like, they have so many more eyeballs daily on their site than any of the other crowdfunders. Yeah. So I went with Kickstarter just because it could, again, put my comic in front of the most amount of people. But yeah, the late pledges thing is also, I think, in response to, there's a site called BackerKit, which a lot of people use post-campaign to fulfill their rewards and stuff. And BackerKit offers a function that you can still order rewards off of their site that you weren't able to do until now on Kickstarter. And I suspect that what it was Kickstarter just realized, hey, we're leaving a lot of money on the table that these other companies are just scooping up.
Right.
So why don't we do what they're doing and just offer it all on our website?
Makes sense.
So yeah, it's great. I'm still sort of, mentally trying to get my head around, well, how is that going to work with like the surveys, when you send out the surveys, and when I put the order into the printer? Like, I can't obviously keep the
fun experiment.
The late pledges open forever.
Right.
I got to cut it off at some point. So
well, they never said
we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
And Yeah. I would love just real quick to talk a little bit about the product people are going to get, because behind the scenes, I've thought a lot about this and talked to a few people about like pricing on Kickstarter and, you know, stuff going up in price. And obviously one of the first things that pops up about your book when we see it on Kickstarter is just the main cover, physical edition, $20. Right. But this isn't a 22-page comic.
Right.
So I'd like to just go in detail about that. Like what are people going to get when they actually get the comic?
Yeah. So one thing that I shared the sort of reticence to pay that, you know, just be completely honest and completely blunt. When I first started investigating Kickstarter and going on Kickstarter, I was like, how can these people like charge $20 for a comic, like 22 pages? But you kind of you have to factor in like, okay, they're including the shipping, which is going to be, you know, around $5 or $6. They're including the pack, you know, they got to pay for the packaging to get it to you. A lot of them are also including like a PDF. And with my PDF, because my comic has been online for free since 2018, I wanted to add value to the digital reward as well. And so I created a 70-page behind the scenes kind of process document of essentially how I made the comic, and every page, you know, there's like rough layouts and penciled versions and unused pages and all sorts of stuff like that. So if you're a process junkie like I am, like I love all that stuff. I created that to give extra value to the digital reward aspect of it. So yeah, I priced that at $12, so you get the comic and the extra all the extra added supplemental material sort of stuff. The reason I priced it at $12 was basically because I ended up putting so much work into putting that PDF together, and it did end up being 70 pages. That's
a lot of content.
Yeah, I gotta charge more. Because originally I was just gonna charge like, you know, an extra $2 or something for it, but I was like, I gotta charge more than this, because that's a lot
of insight for creators too on the process and how I think getting perspectives from other people, that's valuable in itself too. I mean, people charge for that all the time, so I don't see any issue with that at all.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that people will see that, you know, because you're getting the digital deluxe PDF with all the behind the scenes content as part of your reward when you pledge for any print copy. That's cool. Comes with it.
Yep.
So that's $12 value right there. And then the postage is also included, which is $6. So, you know, so then when you're looking at $20, you got $4 left over, and it costs $2.50 to print. So like, I'm not making like a huge amount of profit on it. You know, I worked out the economics of it, and ideally, you know, I want to make enough off of the printing of one comic to print another comic, you know, one copy. So, so yeah, that's how the economics of it kind of informed my pricing structure.
Well, and what I was really getting at for people out there is it's $20 for a 40-page comic.
Yeah,
that's at the end of the day. Like,
I love the insight too, though.
Yeah, I love the insight, but it's not just like I see people $14, $15, and then because that's the thing that kind of irks me is $14, $15 for a 22-page comic, and then after you pledge, like, oh yeah, by the way, $6 more for shipping, $21 for a comic. I understand the economics are rough, but it's pretty rough on the consumer side for that much too. So with this, having it, I think that everybody should just price in their shipping with their tiers. Like, just don't hide it. And
I prefer that personally as a backer. I prefer if the shipping is rolled in.
Yeah. And I love that you did that. And also it's a bigger than 22 pages. We're getting 40 pages of story
it's a 40-page story. And so you get a lot of value. Hopefully people agree. I think you're getting a lot of value for your money.
Sounds to me like you are.
And before we wrap up here and stuff, we're gonna share the Kickstarter link and everything. If you want to spend just a few minutes, because I know you casually mentioned it earlier, and one of my best friends would probably kick me if I didn't at least ask you about it, because he's a huge Simpsons fan.
Oh, right.
The animation work you do as your day job, right? But it's very relative to comics. You talked about transitioning that to art for comics. Can you, and also Chris, I think we probably both noticed you did work early on in the 90s on one of my favorite movies, The Iron Giant. I think, so can you talk just a little bit about like your role in the animation department for that stuff?
So on Iron Giant was the third animated feature film that I worked on. Wow. I worked on Catstone Dance and Quest for Camelot, both for Warner Brothers. Well, Catstone Dance was technically for Turner Feature Animation, but they got bought by Warner Brothers halfway through the production. So, and then Iron Giant was definitely a career high point. The whole crew worked so hard on that. It was a really small crew. Compared to most animated features, it was a smaller. It was probably 2/3 the size of your average crew number,
which is crazy because nowadays they're
huge. So and it was Brad Bird's first animated feature, and it was like I still have friends that I made on those productions at Warner Brothers. Like I met my wife at Warner Brothers, and I've got a whole group of friends who have we've been friends ever since then. So that's, 20 something, 25, 28 years ago or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that was at the very beginning of my career. So I was an assistant animator on that, which meant that I would take the animators' rough drawings and kind of clean them up. So the assistant animation department, they're the drawings that you actually see on screen. With the clean line and everything. And it was a great experience. It was stressful because they all are. You eventually, with any animated feature, you always end up in a crunch period in like the last 3 months where you're literally working 7 days a week.
Oh yeah.
12 hours a day.
Wow.
You make a lot of money because you're getting paid overtime and you don't have any free time to go out and spend the money.
You can't spend the money.
You're at work all the time.
Yeah.
But it was great. And then after Iron Giant, I also worked on Prince of Egypt briefly, like very briefly. I worked on Prince of Egypt in that crunch period to help them finish the film. That was another experience where, both Iron Giant and Prince of Egypt, the crews themselves, like we knew we were working on like real great quality films.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah. Like, did you? Time. Yeah.
Because with Quest for Camelot, everybody knew that film stunk.
Okay.
Like as we were working on it, everyone was like, "This is terrible. This film, it sucks."
But you're still drawing it. You're like, "But we got to get it
doing it." I mean, it's still a job,
Right.
And,
right.
You're getting paid to draw, so it's not like this sucks so much that I want to leave. It's just like, everybody was like, I don't think this is going to be a real crowd.
Not going to be an Iron Giant.
Yeah, exactly. But with Iron Giant, we all knew it was a real great quality film. And so it was really disappointing when it eventually did get released in cinemas and it was sort of crickets at the box office.
I know.
And I don't think that was any fault of Brad Bird or any of the animators or people who were working on it. I think that was a a misfire in terms of how Warner Brothers chose to market or not market, as the case may be, that film. I heard later that it was because Warner Brothers had like a set budget for all their marketing of films that year. Right. And they put most of the marketing budget into the Will Smith film Wild Wild West.
Oh yeah,
and that turned out to tank. Man, that
was the same year. Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah, it was 1999, I think.
Yep, I remember it. Yeah.
And so it was really sort of disheartening to go to the theater on opening night and for Iron Giant and see like, oh, there's only 5 other people in the theater. But fortunately, you know, as you guys both know, like it really did find an audience on home video and then, you know, on DVD, and it's become like this perennial classic, which I totally feel it deserves to be.
Yeah. 100% sure.
And so I'm so happy to have had the chance to work on that so early in my career. And then after that, sort of as a result of the mismanagement by Warner Brothers of Iron Giant, because I had an offer to stay at Warner Brothers and work on Osmosis Jones, their next feature.
Oh my god!
But I kind of
that movie.
I liked it too. I thought it turned out really well, even though I didn't work on it.
Right.
Because at that time, I had seen the reception of Iron Giant and sort of knew it was because Warner Brothers hadn't pushed it very much. And I just thought, like, if this company can't make that film a hit, they're not going to make anything a hit. So I gotta move on. I gotta try and do something different.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I started thinking, well, what about TV animation? I've never tried that.
Interesting.
And I knew a guy, like I had a friend who was working on The Simpsons at that time. And I asked him, like, what sort of jobs are there even on the Simpsons crew? Like, it's a completely new world for me. And he said, oh, well, you would probably want to start, given your skills, you would want to do character layout, which is essentially like animating on the show. And he said, there's a test, I'll get you a test. And so he did, and I did the test, and I got a job as a character layout artist in 1999 on The Simpsons. And I've just been on there ever since.
Still doing it.
And still going. And I kind of worked my way up. You know, I've done character layout and I've done character design. And then I got promoted to assistant director. And then while I was an assistant director, that's when I started wanting to try other things. So I would do storyboard revisions on every show that I was an assistant director on. And then I started doing a board on some of the shows. And then I got promoted to director, and I did a storyboard on every show that I directed as well. And so I was, you know, an episode director on 2 shows. I was co-director, and then 4 shows just solo director. And then about 10 years ago, I got promoted again to the supervising storyboard director on the show, which is now I'm sort of, you know, it's what it sounds like I'm supervising the storyboard crew on every episode and acting as like a director of that crew. So just making sure that like the jokes are being kind of portrayed effectively and, you know, quality control, but also like suggesting like maybe we do this shot from a different angle, and this shot would be more effective if it was joined to this next shot with a camera move, and, you know, just sort of helping the board artists kind of produce their best work. And so it's great. I love my job. I love being on The Simpsons, especially since like when I started on the show, the whole crew was kind of, you know, I started on season 11 and people were saying back then, like, well, we're probably not going to get to 15 seasons. And now it's like we're just starting season 36 on the show.
Yeah. Wow.
Unreal.
So it's just been, literally an unbelievable kind of run, which is now like, it really is part of the history of animations. Because when you think about it, like it's animation itself is an art form that only began soon after film itself began. So it's a 20th century art form. So the history of animation is not that long. So to be part of this kind of, milestone in the history of the art form that I love and I've chosen as a career is just really special. So yeah,
that is pretty amazing. And and just to bring it all back to comics, one thing we talk about with comic books, and when you're visualizing panels and things, it's very cinematic. You're like you said, it's like, where are you going to put the camera in the frame for this panel and things like that. So with animation is a combination, right? Because you are directing and there's drawing and art happening. So illustration. So that obviously helped you translate into the comic book space. You probably, I'd say, had a pretty easy time getting into how you wanted to draw the panels and everything like that.
Yeah, definitely. I almost think like I couldn't have, because I talked earlier about like wanting to do a comic since I was a teenager, but I really don't think I could have done it as effectively without, at any point before the point that I did it, just because the experience that I've had on The Simpsons, particularly in layout and storyboard, a lot of which is about composing that image within a rectangular frame, right? So getting those skills and developing those skills through my animation work has totally informed how I lay out a page. I've also learned a lot about how to lead the eye, how to focus the viewer's attention where you want it to focus, just through principles of composition and compositional tricks and stuff. So yeah, and I learned that all through my experience on The Simpsons, really. And so yeah, it's definitely informed the comic work, and also, like, since I've been doing the comic, it's sort of fed back
That's cool.
into the animation work, because I've learned through doing the comic, like, you can really sort of, it's all about, like focusing the viewer's attention where you want it to, where you want them to look. And so I sort of take those insights from comic making and feed them back into my work on the show. So yeah, it's definitely like this symbiotic relationship, which I really enjoy. Like, that's one part of comic making that I really love, is working out how do I make the reader's eye flow across this page in the right order. And yeah, so it's a really interesting challenge, and every page is a challenge that way, to sort of have that happening, but also make an engaging looking page as well. So yeah, I'm always sort of.
That's very interesting that it goes back and forth between the mediums. I think that's really cool. Matt, you've been so gracious to give us so much time today on the show.
Well, thank you for having me for so much time. I really appreciate it.
We really appreciate it. Our viewers and our listeners, if they want to follow you besides the Kickstarter page, where do you want to direct them?
I have a link tree, which is linktree/Steamroller Man, and that will lead you to the Steamroller Man Facebook page, my personal Instagram, the Steamroller Man Instagram. I'm on X. I'm on a bunch of those other Twitter alternatives that popped up. I don't post much on like Blue Sky or Hive or, all those Mastodon. I still, am on Twitter/X more than those other ones, but I have accounts there. And yeah, so you can find everything, all my links and stuff at linktree/Steamroller Man.
Great.
And to everybody out there listening and or watching, as always, in the show notes down below, I'll have links to the Kickstarter page and to the Steamroller Man website as well, where I was discovering that you can buy some really cool merch as well as the comic.
Oh yeah. Yeah, t-shirts.
Yeah. Matt, as Mike said, thank you so much for being on, taking so much time with us today, and we
thank
really
you
look forward
guys.
to the next
Great
time.
to meet you both.
Yeah, great to meet you. Love to have you back.
That'd be great. Well, I'm going to do Kickstarter for issue number 2 probably next year at some point. So I'd love to come back.
We gotta have you back. Oh yeah.